Okay, so good afternoon, everyone.
Good
Welcome to our
afternoon.
program. You are now looking at a pre-recorded program actually, but we want to say good afternoon to you. We hope that your afternoons are going well. Remember, this program comes to you under ChildLink's Recovery, Safeguarding, Reintegration Initiative, which is funded by the delegation of the European Union to Guyana. And today I have two lovely, lovely, lovely panel members with me, two young people who are very passionate about, child care and protecting children. I have someone who is no stranger to the program. He would have stepped out for a few seconds because he's busy in this child protection game, like I mentioned. So, Mr. Milton Smith, he will join us in a bit. It looks like he's back already. And I have with me here one of our forensic interviewer and trauma-based counselor from ChildLink's CAC, her Child Advocacy Center. And she is here also to share her views with us with regards to providing psychosocial support during the pandemic. This is a part two of last week's program. We are continuing the discussion on providing psychosocial support. So let me say thank you for being here, Rolanda, and thank you for joining me, Milton. I know you both are very busy individuals.
I can
Right?
see
So
Milton is.
yes.
Yes.
So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. He is still trying to be present, while he is, trying to work towards safeguarding our children. So before we go, without further ado, I'm gonna ask Rolanda, why is it especially important that during this time families continue to receive emotional support?
All right. So one of the things that we need to understand that this is completely outside of our norm, not just as Guyanese, but generally as human beings, we're not used to isolation. And so as a result of that, it would clearly have rippling effects as it relates to our mental state. And so having persons understand, you're seeing all that's happening about the country on the news and everything. A lot of these are the consequences of what's happening, and that's the pandemic. This is not something we have ever been used to. We've heard, let's say, for instance, even in Guyana, we've heard many things happening in the outer world. But this is our first attack in terms of a pandemic. We've never had such a pandemic in our country. And so it's important that we understand that this is completely outside of our norm as Guyanese and the world by and large. But it's important also for us to understand that it calls for some adaptation in terms of change of behavior or language. There's so many things that we have to change as it relates to this pandemic. And so it's so important that people do not, embrace this as, while we know it's not our norm, people are still not taking they're not seeing how it can affect them psychologically. And it has been affecting people psychologically. We've had the mortality rate going up, and as a result of that, some of us have lost our own family members. Now, these things can create such psychological barriers as it relates to our normal functioning. And so, with that being said, having persons understand that you have to still look into your mental state, and not just adults, children. I know you asked me for a little piece of Shakita, but there's so much things to say here. But yes, it's very important that we still look into our well-being, and to receive emotional support in this process. One, it's also it's in the unknown. We don't know when it will end. And it's not a part of our norm as human being, and it's sure not a part of the norm in Guyana. And so as a result of that, you always have to keep check with your mental state, not just the physicals. I'm seeing a lot of people exercising, but what about the psychological part? Persons are very conscious that they're getting weight and all of these things, but how is it affecting you psychologically? And so it's very important that we still stay in tune with our mental state and have that emotional support that we need during this time. I'll end there and give my colleague a bit to talk on. Yes.
Well,
I see he's still
recently,
busy.
yeah, he's busy. He's busy. So I think you should take the floor. You should have your say.
Yes. And so I want to say also that we're thinking about how it's affecting adults, but working with clients, I've seen them being affected terribly psychologically in this pandemic season too, where children are feeling very closed in and they don't have that freedom. They're isolated and they don't see their friends as usual. And so these things are affecting them too psychologically. When we look on social media and Facebook, for instance, we see a lot of teenage girls running away. It's not only related to the fact that they want to go do their own thing, like some persons are saying, but the fact that they're enclosed and isolated and there's that lack of socialization, it has some kind of consequence, rippling consequences on all of us as a whole, not just adults, but children. So I see my colleague is no longer so busy. So I'll give him a chance to get a word in.
All right then. At this point of time, with all that is happening, our children need the emotional support that is required to ensure that they live comfortable lives. I am drawing from a quote that was issued by a Dr. Thompson, right? And he's considered to be a child psychologist. And he said, while children may not be the most susceptible to the infection compared to the elderly, the social, educational, and economic consequences may negatively affect the future part of their lives. There are a range of unique circumstances for families with children, including access to educational resources, safe childcare, and access to food. So the pandemic that we're presently experiencing is creating some uncomfortable environment for the family as a whole, right? And more so for children, because their family members of theirs are dying because of different reasons. And so while we as adults may be able to comprehend and roll over these issues as fast as possible, some children are not even having the opportunity to have closure. Because prior to now, they used to be closed casket funerals. They used to be whereby you can't even have the body of the person that would have passed, and that would have been probably the child's mother or father. So they never had that opportunity to have closure, right? And that can have some emotional effect on that child and on the family. But I see now that the government has probably thought about it and take it into consideration to give the family an opportunity to have that closure that most persons need when they would have lost a loved one, and more so lost a loved one to COVID-19, right? And so that emotional support is needed for children even more than it's needed for adults who can comprehend, who can navigate our issues, who can find that resilience to bounce back after these things would have happened. Our children need that, and they won't just comprehend it just like that. It won't just happen just like that. It calls for the support of the entire family to sit down and talk about the entire process, to have those little conversations, not to exclude them and make it seem as though this is a big secret in the family, but to incorporate them in the discussion. Not all of the discussion, because some information they might not need might traumatize them, but sift it through and bring it to a level where they can understand it, and it can pierce their mind, and it can help with their psychological development.
I was reading an article published in Guyana Times the other day, and what the Minister of Health was saying is that there has been a spike in mental health issues since the pandemic. And there are so many families, and I feel like our context, in our local context, and in Guyana, we neglect our emotional well-being, our emotional health. And especially now that we're in a pandemic, we are unsure, we have anxiety, then we have added pressure with our jobs. We have to think about safeguarding ourselves, our families, our children, and all of these things. And so as a result of that, there's so much more pressure being added. I don't know if you guys would like to add some more concerns that families may be facing now that we are living in a global pandemic.
I don't know if you want me to go.
Oh, you
Yeah,
can
It's
go.
okay if I
yeah,
go.
you can go right.
All
Yeah.
right then.
That's fine.
Um, some of the things that I am seeing that are posing some challenges is like, one, stable internet connection, right? Not all family have access to internet. Some of them have never probably heard about internet connection, and it has become a new concept and a new thing that they have to adopt to in with the changes that we are experiencing. Not all family have a tablet and have a computer. I traveled to a place called Monkey Mountain.
Mhm.
A few weeks ago, I went to Monkey Mountain and I went to Paramakatoy. These regions, you don't get phone calls. You can't just pick up the phone and make a call from these regions. These regions rely heavily on internet access and WhatsApp. That's what they use to connect with the outside world, and radio, right? That's what they use to connect with us. And the internet in those regions are provided by government. There's the government free Wi-Fi that some families have access to. But those internet connections are accessed at a particular point or a particular
Yeah.
position or a particular building in the community. And if everybody gets on board and if everybody is logged on at the same time, the internet connection obviously will slow down, right? Because it's like
Definitely.
an old community of couple hundreds of people accessing that one internet connection at one time. And they are individual persons in the community that offer this service, but it's at a cost. And that will create some situations for family who cannot afford the access to internet services, or don't have a computer, don't have access to a phone that have WhatsApp, that they'll be able to get. But I'm sure that the government is using alternative measures to reach these families, to get the services that are needed for them, right? The fact that persons are losing their jobs, right? Not being able to, and some are losing their jobs, some have reduced working hours, just to make the environment a bit more comfortable for other staff and to reduce the risk of the coronavirus spreading from persons to person, reduce the amount of persons in the office, and some people have to work less hours. In the government sector, um, you're paid whether you're on or you're off because you're working from home. But in the private sector, not all private sector companies are providing that salary for families, and some families have to. That's a cut in your budget, a big cut in your budget. That is already probably small for some families, and that creates pressure. That creates pressure. That creates pressure for the family and puts the family under tremendous stress, that they would lash out at the children, because they cannot deal with the stress. Some of them don't even know how to address their stress issues, don't know what they can do. And so getting the information out there and helping them to understand and cope with the environment. Some persons have to work at home, remotely at home. But how can you work at home if you probably don't have the connections and the internet access to work from home? Some jobs you can't even work from home, you have to be there. And so you have to take a reduce in pay in order to hold your job, in order to help your family to continue going. But with all of this being said, we must also applaud the government's effort in providing the 21 to $25,000 to each household to, to, to help to cushion that effect that's being experienced presently.
All right. So added to what my colleague would have mentioned there, we also have the problem with some families being concerned that because of them having internet, it has led to some other dynamics within the family. So as a
Definitely.
result, right. So we have those that are lacking the internet and those who have the internet that have, it has caused additional problems. So our children are home, and you find that a lot of times outside of their school hours, they're on the telephone, they're on their cell phone, sorry, and they're engaging in conversation and activities that they should not be engaging.
Definitely.
Because
Definitely.
of course the school or the daycare would have been in a position as a caregiver with the parents at work. Then they know they're at school with the supervision of teachers. While things happen in school, it's even more there's more exposure as it relates to them being in the home. Like my colleague mentioned, a lot of parents are working from home. And so in being able to do your job and manage your child's whereabouts and what they're doing at the time can be quite challenging for some families. And so we have our teenagers getting involved in conversations with persons on Facebook that are, strangers, and, you know, sexual contents, and having these sexual
Yes,
contents.
yes, yes,
Some of them,
yes.
like I've mentioned before, would have, you saw them on the Facebook, they were missing and gone, running, and all of these different things. So that also is one for an additional concern for families. Children having too much access now to the internet for long hours and long periods of time. Um, One of the things too that I think that is a concern for family now is that, especially when I'm working with the children, you find that the children are mentioning now, they didn't know that about their parents. The time spent together, it has been, while some families are benefiting from it, there are others that you find that they tend to be clashing a lot. So you have teenagers, for instance, if one is referred for abuse, my job is to address the abuse, but now I'm finding that I'm addressing more of what the domestic problems that's happening in the home. And so, while you want to target what they were referred to, like referred for, like my colleague who works at child protection, we will know that there's so many other additional issues that are coming up now that you have to address those. So you find parents are, like he would have mentioned, that they become a little more abusive, and children are now learning certain things, especially the teenagers. You find them, yes, I didn't know my mother was like that. I can't, take the fact that we're just arguing. And so these dynamics are happening all around with what's happening in indoor now in the home, with everyone being at home at the same time. So, these are all concerns that are affecting families outside of just the whole pandemic and the finance and other things. Some of them do have the finances there, but it's causing more harm than good. The children are accessing. So, for instance, we have some of our children, in fact, too, that are in contact with perpetrators, these pedophiles, because they have
Definitely,
easy
yes,
access, and
yes.
some of them are using it as a ground to get to the children now. So they don't have to meet
Definitely,
them out there. They're actually
yes.
meeting them there. And so they can have them
Mhm.
isolated in their rooms to show sexual contents and all of these things. So these are all things that should be concerning for families too.
And I want to take you up on that one. Support the concept.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only about giving your children access to
Mm-hmm.
internet, but it's
Monitor.
supervising
That's
the
right.
process.
That's right.
Mhm.
Supervising the
Definitely.
process. Because only today I had to deal with an issue where a child was given a phone to do the work, and when the child is not on the phone doing the work, the child is communicating and
Yeah.
taking calls from grown adults,
Mm-hmm.
and these people are calling the child. So and the mother wants to know who's calling my daughter. This is a 13-year-old who can be calling my daughter and trying to connect with my child,
Yeah.
and not connecting through me. And when the mother answers the phone, the person hangs up the phone, right? So I take you there, and I said, and I support that concept, that it's not the access to internet only, but is the supervised access
The
to the
supervisor.
internet.
That's right.
One of the other things that I would like to speak about, Shakwita and Roland, is that some children are now adopting the role of adults. That's
Mhm.
an issue that is affecting us now
Yes. Yes.
also, because the school is out. Some parents have no other alternative than to go to work and
And do
continue their
that.
regular working
Yes.
hours.
Mhm.
Some children have to take on the role of being the caregiver now for their
Yeah.
younger siblings,
Mhm.
and you can't have a child supervising a child,
Exactly.
Yes.
right? Children need to be supervised no matter what their age. A child is under the laws of Guyana, a child is between the age of 0 to 18, right? Even if you're leaving an 18-year-old with their younger sibling, it should not be for long hours, for 8 hours. Um, I can say this to you that sometimes it's difficult for me to stay so long with my minors because they're busy, they want this, they're hectic, they're crying, and it creates some level of frustration in me as a parent to imagine,
Yeah.
and I'm an adult. right?
Yeah.
Who should be know how to deal with it. Because
Mhm.
my daughter is crying, I don't know if to do. My daughter wants this, she wants that, she wants that. You're giving her this, but yet she's crying. And sometimes you're left in awe. You want to know, what should I do? What is it that you want? Right? And I'm an adult. Imagine a child having to play this role,
Yeah.
right? Another child having to play this role and adopting this role. And I see it can create it can lead to one,
Yeah.
the other children, the older children abusing the younger children, right? Because of the frustration and the adoption of the role that they're taking on, that it's not their responsibility, but they're
Yes.
trying to contribute willingly to the family and to the process and support their parent. And in the end, sometimes more harm is done than good. And so with the opening of work and with the I do pray that schools reopen properly, daycares with the necessary precaution, right? Some parents having to adapt to the work. They themselves don't know the work. They themselves probably have not gone long in school, and they themselves they don't understand. I have to discuss this topic with my child. I myself am being taught just like the child, right? So how can I relate to them when I can't even understand what I'm relating to them, right? Because the work is way above my head, right? And so those are some issues that may cause children to be stressful, that may cause children to lash out, right? And may cause parents to lash out to their children.
You have
Yes.
to understand too, another contributing factor is the fact that, just like what Milton is saying, that we're concerned about that aspect, but then there those parents that are good caregivers, and now they're leaving them with somebody who they might trust. They think they trust. Well, they
Definitely.
trust, but we don't know, if that's the perpetrator or so on. So
Mm-hmm.
those are all some concerns. So I know for a fact that I've spoken to some parents, and they're very concerned about what's happening, and they're in a position where they cannot help it, that they had to leave their children with a neighbor
Yeah.
just to
Mm-hmm.
have some sense of comfort that I left them in the care of some adult. But
Mm-hmm.
there's still the fear of that adult can be another abuser. So that's
Yes.
another concern for a lot of parents and families. And so um can you imagine dealing with that when you're on the job, you're trying to keep the job and still thinking if your children is safe at a neighbor, because they might say it with the neighbor, but what about the neighbor's friend that visits?
That comes
I
to
spoke
visit.
to, yeah, because I
Mm-hmm.
spoke to a child, and that lately, and that one of the children that I did a forensic interview with, that was how he got abused. It was the aunt's friend.
Mm-hmm.
He was safe, but then the aunt's friend that the mother left him with, he came in and abused the child and didn't do it in the house. And that was the child's first encounter with this person, in
I
fact.
see that.
So he just
Mm-hmm.
did what he had to do with that child. So that's another concern for parents. Who you leaving your children with, that's important too. It might even be a family member, and being in the field
Mm-hmm.
of sexual abuse, for a fact an abuser can be anyone.
Yes.
And so that's something
Mm-hmm.
we
Yeah.
need to think about.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm
yes,
thinking about
yes.
your time. Go ahead, Chiquita.
There's so many issues,
Yeah.
that families are faced with now. I mean, outside of living in a global pandemic, we knew and understood the challenges that families are faced with on a day-to-day level. We understood the importance of safeguarding children. But now that
Mhm.
there is a pandemic, there are different rules and regulations by which families have to follow in order to protect their health and the health of their children. And as a result of
Certainly.
that, it can place a strain on the emotional well-being of that person, of the parents and of the children. And a lot of times, like I mentioned earlier, in Guyana, we completely neglect our emotional well-being, not seeing it
Definitely.
as something important for us to function on a day-to-day basis.
Hmm.
However, I'd like to ask you guys, what are some indicators that individuals, I'm speaking about parents, can look for in themselves and or children that may indicate to them that they need to focus a bit more on their emotional well-being, and what are some activities that families can participate in to support each other?
Well, if I may, Milton, you want me to go, or you?
Go
Okay.
right ahead.
All right. So, one of the indicator that parents should definitely you should look for is that we have children who on a regular would have not good relationship with their parents. And as a result of what's happening and the change of the environment and the society and all that you're seeing on the media and everything that's happening, we have parents that, I'm talking to children and like, Miss, I didn't know my mother was like that, the angry outbursts and the senseless beating, you know, and the level of aggression towards your children and, the physical abuse, it has escalated to some extent, even to some of my teenagers. They say, Miss, my mother just want to hit. But what she's not, or that parent is now recognizing, it's that, that's an indicator that you need to deal with your well-being, your emotional state. Something is happening, something is changing, something is different. You have high levels of depression. Some people, and this is not just for parents, I'm talking about children too. Children are becoming quite depressed with the we have children that are self-harming again. Um, that might have happened before and they would have received counseling, but these things have it has surfaced again where they're actually dealing with, I think the isolation is triggering their
Yes.
thoughts because they're isolated so much. You're just thinking, all you're finding yourself doing is thinking. And unless you find
Yes.
yourself
Yes.
being very proactive in something very positive, you're just thinking. And it's carrying them back now to, what happened last year. Remember time like this? Some of them are saying, I remember time like this. I was in counseling and I was, and so it's bringing back some of these symptoms of abuse. Some of them are self-harming again. And okay, you ask, why are you self-harming? Miss, I just so depressed all the time. And I know it used to do this and used to make me feel better. Does it have to do with so these are all different indicators. Parents are depressed. Parents have become withdrawn also from their children because
Mhm.
they're spending 8 hours of the day doing the work on the computer and still trying to manage their child's schoolwork. And as a result of that, when that 8 hours is it's through, they need time for themselves. And so what happened? Okay, leave me now. I need some time to breathe. I see a whole day. I had you all day. I had to do my work and so on. So I just need some time. And so as a result of that, children are being neglected. So, there's so many rippling effects and so many indicators to show that clearly that people need to focus on their well-being. These are all behaviors that you can observe that's happening. So I'll pause there for my colleague to go.
So, thank you. And some of those are the ones that I was thinking about.
Mhm.
But even think about it, when we're depressed as adults, or if we're having emotional issues, sometimes we don't eat as we should. We have a loss of appetite. And some of our children, we observe that, hey, that they're not eating as they usually
Mhm.
would.
Yeah.
They're just taking bites. Something might be very some families are not being able to get that closure um,
Mhm.
because of the loss of their loved ones. And I
Yeah.
see that, like I said, I saw that the ministry would have adjusted that. But that closure can lead to a whole lot of issues, right? Because it's important at times that some people see a body. It's important that sometimes some people see that body being put in the ground, right? to get that
That
understanding
final
that, hey,
farewell.
this
Yeah.
is the last of it. My family member is gone. I know where they are, right? Compared to I don't know where they're buried. I don't know where they are. I've never seen that incoming home, right? Some of the things that people, it's anxiety and worry. Some people, children are very, they're worried. They want to know if daddy's coming home today, if mommy is coming home today, right? Mommy didn't greet me today as she would greet me. Mommy's stressed, mommy's lashing out. Mommy's getting agitated over any little thing. Children can become aggressive, right? During this pandemic, that
Yeah.
indicates that something is happening. You need, as a parent, it's important that you observe your child's behavior to know that if this is the normal behavior compared to what you're experiencing. When did this behavior start? Did this behavior start when the pandemic started? Or maybe it started a long while before or a long while after. So it's important for you as a parent to trace these things to know when it started, if it was triggered by something and when it was triggered, so that you will be able to go back to that period to see what is it that happened, to see if you can fix it, right? Anger and crying and weaning,
Temper
continuous
tantrum. Yes.
crying, than the usual crying that you will normally get from them. They can't sit still. They're uneasy. The children might be clingy. They're hearing about so much death that is being announced on the radio and on the TV that they don't want you to go out the door. If you're going out the door, they're holding on to you and they're hugging you and they're greeting you like if it's the last hug, because they themselves would have heard about. So they want to know if my mommy or my daddy is not coming home today. For parents who have children on the frontline workers who like our nurses and our police officers who are constantly interacting with um with patients in COVID-19 situations. They have children who might be worried, maybe mommy is not coming home today, maybe mommy haven't come did not come home for a couple days because she has to be working shift after shift after shift. And in some countries, I don't think that is happening in Guyana, right? But these are all things that we need to pay attention to that indicate to us that the family is going through some stress and our children are experiencing some level of stress.
And in addition to that too, you gotta think about the fact, let's say your child is they're asking a lot of questions. It's a
Correct.
clear indication that they're thinking about what's happening. So I know some parents might be so tired about what's happening, they want to talk about it and all of these things, but it's important that they address those questions with their children, because they're asking questions because they're curious. Some children are even worried if their grandfather or their family member might be next to the coronavirus. You're seeing that it's all over television and these things are happening. So as a result of that, children are quite concerned, and they're asking questions. So answer their questions. Don't
Yes.
shun them. It's very important that you address whatever they're asking, because it's
Mm-hmm.
affecting them too. Don't, parents, like I've said before, parents think that somehow it's affecting only them, but it's really affecting our children and at all age groups, right?
Yes.
Some I think it was a 4-year-old that said to me, she was mentioning something about the mask and something about corona and people die out with corona. How she was
Yes.
saying it, you can
Yes.
tell it
Yes.
was so concerned for her. And
Mm-hmm.
so she was really, really and I was observing her demeanor and everything. So she was so like an adult, but like she was concerned about what's happening, and they're seeing these things on television and so on. And so those are all an indication that ensure to observe your emotional state and well-being.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's important for parents to understand, like you would have rightfully mentioned, that children are equally as involved
Yeah.
and they are aware because, like, there's a saying that the children that are born nowadays are not like the old time children.
Oh,
And so
gee.
they're able to conceptualize and understand things way more,
Information.
Definitely.
information and do all of these things. I can vividly remember my mother telling me last night we were having the conversation. We have a mini mart, so she was saying that this little girl that would come to the shop, she came in and she said, "Why are you looking so sad? Normally when I come here you're smiling." So my mother said, "I'm just a bit tired." And she, "Okay, well, you need to rest." And she's a little girl. And I can vividly remember
Yes.
one of them also coming in and she would sanitize her hands and what. And so I said, you know what you're using that for? She said, yes, to kill the coronavirus. I said, you know what is coronavirus? She said, it's like a cold and it's very and you know, and
She's
she was
going
able
to
They're
to
fully
repeat it.
aware.
engage
They're
me
very
in a
much aware of what's
conversation
happening.
Fully
about
aware.
what it is, you know, and it was so I was blown away. It was so amazing to, you know, have that dialogue with a child. And so I want parents to really understand that children are involved and they are aware. So I'm going to ask you guys, and this is the final question: what are some activities that families can participate in or try just to support each other during this trying time?
Mm. For me, I would like to suggest that there is a lot of bonding activities.
Mm-hmm.
When I say bonding, I mean you might not be able to go to the garden, but you might be able to create that garden setting probably in your community. There might be a park, there might be somewhere, or there might be an environment in your yard that you can go to with your family that doesn't require
Mm-hmm.
you connecting with a whole lot of people, right? Um, there might be fishing. You can go fishing with your children, teaching them new skills, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are other bonding activities that you can do. I
Mm-hmm.
always suggest this one because it's very good to see something that you would have planted grow, right?
Hmm.
So
Yes.
farming is a key one. I know that the Ministry of Agriculture would have been pushing this one to help families because that's a plant that's a type of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
It's considered to be plant
Yes.
therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Farming, when we see something that we would have put into the ground,
Growing.
grows and develop, it speaks about new life, it speaks about new possibilities, it speaks about new beginnings, right? It speaks about, look, that is our next meal, right? So when you get the children engaged in that process, they feel a part of the entire process. They feel that they would have contributed. They feel that they would have contributed to something. If you play games with them, right? So I encourage parents, buy some of the board games and have a games night,
Mm-hmm.
where you set aside a games night where you guys can play games together, maybe even a movie night, right? Where you can watch a movie as a family and you can sit apart from all that is happening, right? And I say to parents, don't allow yourself to be engulfed too much in all the information that is floating around out there, because that can lead to some of your stresses today. When you're seeing every
Yes.
day that the news is saying this person is dying, that person is dying, and all of these things, that can contribute to your stressful situation. And so I want to encourage parents that don't give our children too much information and don't give them too little information,
Yes.
but keep it at
Yes.
average there so that you know that they're on point, and talk with them sometime, pick their mouths to see what they know, right?
Yes.
So you will know what more you need to tell them about and what you need to debunk or what you need to clarify what they're getting. So those are a few activities that I would like to say. Listening to music and dancing.
Yes.
Playtime. I was about to say playtime. You can have playtime with your children. One of the while my colleague he was talking about, I was thinking about all of those things that he mentioned, but I'm thinking the outdoor games would be more ideal at this time.
Yeah.
Since we're been indoors so many times, we're connected to the social media and all of that. Go outdoors. We remember as children, we did those things and it creates some sense of relief. It's a form
Yes.
of exercise too, which is
Yes.
self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
then you have you have the bonding time with your child, and even during those times, like I was thinking about the gardening, that's so effective now because a lot of families are into farming now, and it has
Yes.
been very therapeutic for a lot of people. I mean, people saw you seen on Facebook when they pick from the people just put in the pictures up there of what they
Yes.
reap from their
What they
garden.
read.
Yes, and so it's a sense of accomplishment, and so
Yes.
when you have that done with the children, you can even have that conversation while farming. you can have those bonding times. How was your day? How you dealing with everything? Is there anything that you want to tell mommy? While you work on the bed and the different things that you're working on. That's good time to bond and play. I'm thinking about also be creative in terms of discussion. So no child likes you to really sit. Okay, you sit in that chair and I sit
Drill
here
them.
and we have that talk. No, you go outside. I know many persons are following this red table discussion that Smith's wife.
JJ, the Pinkhead Smith
Yes,
Red Table
yes,
Talk. Yeah.
yes. And so you be creative in your own round table discussion. Maybe it'll happen around the tamarind tree or
Yes.
Tree Talk.
or something. You have it in outdoor, a very natural environment where it's quite relaxing. You play some soul out and things like that. What happens when you're indoor? You can have that time, like my colleague said, you watch some movies, but it must be movies that maybe you enjoy. Not too many killings, because we're hearing there's so many deaths, the
Yes.
mortality rate just climbing, and then everything that's happening in the world as a whole. So it's not just our country, it's the world in general. The world is in chaos. And so there's nothing positive really coming. And so any little positive thing that you can hold on to with your family, have for the mothers, I can say, cook together with your teenage daughters. Have that time, that bonding time in the kitchen where she cut up and you gaff and you laugh.
Definitely.
I know I have a friend. She has a son and a daughter, and her husband, he would generally make time for them, and they're the boys' time, and the wife is her daughter, and then there's the family time. So the fathers would take his father, sorry, would take him to play football in the field, and like my colleague said, fishing, and he's so
Yes.
amazing. Look at me, what me and daddy caught together. Those are memories you're creating for them. So
Definitely.
yes, it's a
Definitely.
pandemic. It's a hard time for us to adjust to, but
Yes.
we can still get some good memories
Yes.
out of
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
I,
COVID.
there's only one other thing, Shaquita, that I would like to contribute.
Mm-hmm.
I know not everybody is religious, but
Mm-hmm.
family devotion is very important.
Mm-hmm.
I'd
Yes.
like to put this out there. For those who do it, I'd like to encourage you. Every morning you get up, you have that little family time where you can
Tap
speak
into your
to
faith.
the higher being, to whatever faith you believe in, speak to that higher
Mm-hmm.
being and seek guidance throughout the day. And when you're finished in the afternoon, you say you go back to whatever you call your creator, your God, or whatever,
Yes.
and you
Yes. That
connect
highest
again,
source. Yes.
giving thanks, and teach your children about thanksgiving,
Yes.
for keeping us throughout the day, right?
Yes.
Church is out, and you can still have your little church at home.
Sing and
I
dance and
know,
clap.
and it has been so much creative. Persons have been so much creative, right? Teaching them to play a new instrument, right?
All of that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and even buying a pet for them that they can
Mm-hmm.
take care of,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Learning a
And
new
that's called pet
language.
therapy,
Mm-hmm.
right? That is
Yeah.
very that helps to soothe the mind and helps you to stay
Yeah.
calm. So these are some things that we can do as a family. It's inexpensive. It's ways that we can still use conventional means. These are things that used to be done, but
That's right.
because of all the
Before the
new
social media.
inventions and all of these things,
Yeah.
we have disconnected totally from these lifestyles. And so we want to encourage persons to readapt some of these things, and see them working for you. See them
Yeah.
working for you. So you don't have to
Yeah.
study about food all the time, but you have your little garden that you can go to that was there before, right?
Yes.
So I would really like to encourage this for parents and children, and this is something that we would really like to tell parents from the desk of the Child Protection Agency. It's important that we create a safe and comfortable environment for our
Yeah.
children.
Indeed.
And that has to do with even the change in times, because there's going to be change throughout life, and we have to know how to adapt, and we have to know how to make what can work for us in those changes. And
Mm-hmm.
so yes, you have people saying, this should have happened and this used to happen, but this is the fact, this is the reality of what we're living in now, and we've got to find ways on how to cope and manage and still be happy at this time.
Yeah. I can vividly remember the other day, my brother and I, he is 18 years old, we were having a conversation, and he said, Chris, I feel like I'm living in a movie. I feel like
Yeah.
this whole world is a
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
Nigeria, like Congo, like
All
everything
over.
that's happening. So I said, well, then your mind have to become your escape. And so
Yeah.
you have to be careful what you feed your mind with, the kind of
Right.
music you listen to, the
Definitely.
kind of books
Definitely.
you read, the
Mhm,
kind of
mhm.
content you take in. Because when the world becomes too much, sometimes we got to go into our heads
You
and
gotta know
find
to
that
escape it. Yes.
peace.
We gotta get
Mm-hmm.
it out. And we
Yes.
Yes.
gotta once we put it in there,
Hmm.
once we allow it to get in there,
Hmm.
it will play with us.
Yes.
Exactly.
It bears root.
Exactly. So we
That's
got to
right.
be very careful and considerate. We got to treat our minds, treat our hearts, treat ourselves as though, you know what? I got to make it through this. My family have to make it through this. And
Because
so
this
I
is the
have to
reality of the world.
make the
Yes.
best decisions. Monitor everything that you do, the content, the movies you watch, like Milton and Rolanda would have mentioned, the
Yeah.
music you listen to, because
Yeah.
all of these things will have an effect on your emotional well being. When I'm sad, when I go into my mind, what do I think of? Do I think of a song that's degrading? Do I think of a song that I listen to about steady love, or
Mm-hmm.
about something that calms me? And so it is important that we take care of ourselves and we love up on our children, as I would
That's right.
always say. Okay,
Yes.
so I want to say thank you to Milton and Rolanda for joining me today. I really, really, really enjoyed this discussion.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed. Thank you, Milton. I know you have a busy, busy day, but you still took the time out. Rolanda, also thanks to you for
Always
joining
a
me.
pleasure. Hmm.
Yes, and I want to remind you guys that this program was brought to you under our Recovery Safeguarding Reintegration Initiative, which is funded by the delegation of the European Union to Guyana. Until next time, I'm your moderator, Shapita Thomas.